G'day everyone. I've got a bit of a special interview today just to mark the 50th anniversary of when Cyclone Tracy hit Darwin. And today I'm interviewing someone who went through it. Daryl, he's in Pilco's Chat on Weather, so you'll see him commenting on there or maybe even some of my posts. So, g'day Daryl, how are you going?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Right, so we'll jump straight into it. And first of all, ask you, how old were you at the time that the cyclone hit?
Well, I was 22 and my good wife Annette was 20. We arrived in Darwin in September 74 as newlyweds and came north for the big experience. We sort of settled into Darwin quite well in September, right in the throes of the build-up. And an interesting little fact, when Tracy hit, we then went through 2 cyclones and an earth tremor in our first 3 months as newlyweds in Darwin.
Right.
I think it was Cyclone Emily hit. Well, when I say it hit, it passed by Darwin. And then we had the earth tremor and then Cyclone Tracy. So that's how we started our life in Darwin as young newlyweds. And yes, Tracy itself, we got word around the day before Christmas Eve, so the 23rd of December, that there was this cyclone brewing sort of to the north of the Tiwi Islands. And, as newcomers to Darwin, we didn't know much about cyclones and all the rest of it, so we just followed the advices as they came through. On the day in question, Christmas Eve, I was working. Of course, it was, if I remember rightly, it was a Friday. I'll stand corrected on that. And my wife's mother and father had arrived the day before to come up and see the newlyweds, never been north of Alice Springs. So they had come up and sort of resided with us the day before. Anyway, that evening, I actually went down to the local phone box and rang my mother in Adelaide, and she said, "Oh, what's this cyclone?" I said, "Oh, no, look, it'll be all right." And it was blowing fairly hard. That was about, just before dark on Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we went home and we'd done things like taped windows, secured everything underneath the house.
All the usual precautions.
All the usual precautions, and sort of settled down to just ride it out, if you like. Anyway, the wind started increasing. And I will say, first of all, we were living on Lee Point Road, Waggaman, which at that stage was the very edge of Darwin. The suburbs of Wallagi and Noola and north of that were just being developed.
Mm-hmm.
So across the road from us was all the bush and a little bit of subdividing and big stormwater pipes ready to go. So the wind started increasing, about 8 p.m, and we were listening to the advices, and initially it looked like it was going to pass to the west of Darwin, and we thought, oh, that's okay, this is quite exciting. My father-in-law and I were sitting there about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, sipping on port, thinking this is...
having a good Christmas Eve.
Having a good Christmas Eve, and all the hams and everything were in the fridge ready to go for next day. We sort of didn't think much of it, and then all of a sudden we noticed across the road all the bin boys coming along and emptying the bins, and at that stage in Darwin they ran behind the trucks, picked up their bins and emptied them into the back of the truck. So we thought, oh yeah, geez, they might want to finish off doing their bin run and get back home just in case it gets a bit worse.
Yep.
Anyway, look, we didn't think sort of too much of it until later on that evening, getting into around, say, the 10:30, 11 o'clock mark, but the winds were slowly increasing. Then we got further advices and warnings from the Bureau of Meteorology that, things were looking like they were going to get a little bit worse, and they slowly did. And to get right into it, about 1 a.m, the winds were really howling through, and we thought, gee, this is quite interesting. Now, the housing in Darwin at that stage, we're in an elevated house, and they're all lined up like carbon copies of one another, facing the same direction all along Lee Point Road. they would build about a house a day. They'd have crews out building them in Darwin. And so people weren't too worried at that stage. They were in an elevated house because they were to the what was then the cyclone code of the time.
Yep.
But the house we were in was a rectangular house, and on one side, the long side, on the northern side, they had a little veranda indented in there. And the wall on that side, next to the door that went out on the veranda, started just vibrating quite markedly. Then the winds slowly increased, and then next thing you know, the cornice at the top of where the wall joins the ceiling fell off.
Oh.
We thought, gee, this is a bit serious.
Yeah.
The next thing you know, the whole wall split down the side. The fibro wall split, and that was the wall that contained the veranda when you went outside. So what was happening is the wind was building up in that little rectangle that comprised the veranda, and then the whole wall started vibrating backwards, shaking backwards and forwards, going backwards and forwards like that. We thought, gee, we're in a bit of strife here. Then we could hear roofing iron flying around from neighbouring houses or maybe even our house.
Yeah.
So what happened then was we decided we can't stay in this house. This house is disintegrating.
Yeah.
And we, upstairs in an elevated house, underneath the house, all those houses had a Besser brick storeroom. So we thought we'd better get out of this house, and the best place to go would be the Besser brick storeroom.
Yep.
So what we did was there was a staircase on the other side of the house, and also on the veranda side. We went down to the opposite side. When we got outside to go down to the storeroom, the wind was that strong, we had to hang on to the railings and inch our way downstairs and get around to the storeroom.
Yeah.
So then we ended up in the storeroom underneath the house and rode the cyclone out there. In the meantime, it was like Armageddon. And we could hear the house disintegrating above us, and later on in the night, all the floorboards were starting to fly off, so we realised the whole house must have disintegrated.
Yeah.
And the floorboards were banging up and down. The back of the house were the bedrooms, so all the floorboards to the back half of the house were gone. We had on the front living area of above the storeroom, there were the floorboards were still there, but they were flapping away.
Yep.
And so we rode it down there. About 3 a.m, the winds abated. So the classic eye of the storm, not necessarily passed straight over the top of us,
but close by
to the point where we thought it was over.
Yep.
But then, in classic terms, half an hour later, roughly, the winds came with equal force in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So after sort of initially, we did not go outside. We just looked and saw the stars out through where the floorboards had disappeared above the storeroom. And the winds came back with equal strength in the other direction and went on till about 5 a.m. So we sat down there in water about 18 inches deep. My wife actually went to sleep. She's a very good sleeper. And then dawn had finally arrived, first light about 5 a.m. and all the rest of it. And I didn't go outside, but I climbed up on a hobby box to look out where the floorboards had disappeared above us. So I looked out, and it's an image that will stay with me forever. Darwin, prior to that, was the lush, tropical, beautiful, well-vegetated city that we all love and cherish now. I looked out, and as far as the eye could see, there was nothing except trees with a few minor branches coming out. It reminded me of a nuclear winter.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was.
Yeah, I've seen photos where it's just flat.
No foliage left anywhere, and the damage was substantial. We were actually looking after the neighbour's house. They'd gone south, as a lot of people do. They'd gone back to see relatives. And we were saying, how come our house has been destroyed and not the neighbours? Why is ours the one that was being destroyed? When I looked out that window, out that gap, I realised it wasn't just our house that got destroyed. It was
everyone.
All the northern suburbs. Okay, so then the winds it sort of died down about dawn and all the rest of it. So in some ways, it's probably good that it happened in the night because you weren't tempted to venture outside. So we got up the next morning. Annette's mum and dad were still with us, of course. So that was their welcome to Darwin. They hadn't been anywhere in Darwin other than Casuarina Square.
Yeah.
So then, luckily, because we're on the edge of Lee Point Road, after checking with neighbours that were around and all the rest of it, we decided what we were going to do. We couldn't stay in the house. There's nowhere to sleep or eat. All our food was gone, all the food that everyone had piled up ready for Christmas Day, because this was now Christmas Day. So we ended up at Casuarina Senior College, or as Casuarina High School back in those days. And probably, I would imagine a couple of hundred people ended up at Casuarina Senior College. And people actually slept in the classrooms, and Annette and her mother slept in a classroom with a whole heap of other people. Annette's dad and I stayed with the car, our beautiful little Tirana, which we'd managed to get out and, funnily enough, drive to Casuarina Senior College.
Oh, so it was not damaged then, the car?
The car underneath the house was not damaged.
Oh, just the top.
Just the house. It's up at the whole upper level, which was the house. Was gone, and with an elevated house, you just parked underneath, single car park. And so we then spent Christmas night at Casuarina Senior College. A few of us went and raided Casuarina Shopping Square, which was decimated, and we got meat and food from Coles. Brought it back. We had a big cook-up barbecue back at Casuarina Senior College. But Annette's mum got quite ill, and not to the point of needing hospital treatment, but there was absolutely no communication with the outside world, zero. We found out later on that there was no one down south knew what had happened in Darwin other than that a cyclone had hit it. There was no communication for at least a couple of days. And so we made the decision, because we're on the edge of Darwin, that we would drive out. So along with a lot of other people, we became what were then termed as Darwin refugees, and packed up on Boxing Day, and we headed out that afternoon and drove south.
Did you ever consider, because obviously you came back, but a lot of people I know left Darwin after that and never returned. Did you ever consider?
No.
Because leaving and never coming back, or no?
Look, we did end up going back to Adelaide in about after 18 months because there was just too much going on with Darwin. We ended up living in 12 places. We actually ended up back in Adelaide, and that's another good story. We ended up driving right through to Adelaide with a lot of Darwin refugees. We had only the clothes on our back. That's all we had, and we ended up in Adelaide. Well, then I came back because I was with the Department of Education. And all the new teachers were starting elsewhere in the territory. Outside of Darwin, everything's fine. So life had to go on in the rest of the Northern Territory. So I actually flew back, and we ended up going to Alice Springs and working out of Alice Springs. But I stayed in Darwin more or less. I came back after 2 or 3 weeks in January and stayed on. Then my wife came back. We ended up living on the Greek liner. They actually docked at Stokes Hill Wharf, and not Stokes Hill, Fort Hill Wharf. And that became a Commonwealth hostel, and we lived in there for a good couple of months in air-conditioned comfort with all meals provided. I must say, from a weather point of view, Nico, that when we drove out, we got to Berry Springs, no further south than Berry Springs, no damage. You would not have even known a cyclone had hit. Now, you'd have to have a look at the path that the cyclone took after going inland, but it roughly went down in that direction. And as we know, certainly back in those days, cyclones lost all their energy. But south of Berry Springs, good as gold. Free run through to.
She was very compact. Tracy was.
Cyclone, with a. I will say I ended up working for the Weather Bureau for 12 years. I went back to Adelaide in 76 with the Weather Bureau, and then I I've got to get it right. But anyway, I ended up with the Bureau in Adelaide and then finally came back with the Weather Bureau in Darwin. So I did study up all the records and all the rest of it.
Yep.
And the good mail is that it was definitely a Category 5 cyclone. The damage sustained to buildings, property and the surrounding countryside indicated that it was the severest category. People that have studied it know that the anemometer and the equipment broke during it, so there are no accurate records of the maximum wind speed.
Wasn't it 217 was the last?
217, I think you're right.
Yeah, it was the last recorded wind gust.
Well, look, people can speculate on what it did finally get to, but it would have had to have been the high 200s for sure.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the damage, yeah.
I've ended up being an admin for Weather IQ, which was formerly Oz Cyclone Chasers with Chris Nitsopoulos and the crew, Mick Keeley, Trevor Acton locally, who are on Pilco's.
Yep.
And on Wandering Weatherman, of course, we belong to all the good pages. And we actually went through and chased Cyclone Marcus, wasn't it, that hit Darwin?
Yes.
And we saw the damage that did that with what we estimated out in the northern suburbs to be winds of about 150 kilometres an hour. And you look at what happened with Tracy, my estimate, just as a layperson, would be that it was, approximately double that.
Yep.
So, that's Cyclone Tracy from the weather story. We had a very interesting trip through to Adelaide afterwards. We actually, everywhere we went south through to Adelaide, we were looked after.
Yep.
As refugees. We had no money. We did not have to open our pockets for fuel, food, clothing. Tennant Creek was set up, the town hall was set up like a supermarket and a department store.
Yep.
And we ended up with more clothes when we got to Adelaide than we had back in Darwin.
Yeah.
And everywhere we stayed, people were just so generous and looked after us. And as I said, when I got to Adelaide, we got to Adelaide finally. My father-in-law and I drove through from Alice Springs. My wife and her mother caught the bus down. We actually went through the Woomera Rocket Range, which was all bitumen road.
Yeah.
And allowed us to take a shot because it was all dirt road from south of Alice Springs through to Port Augusta back in those days.
Oh, okay, before they...
So we nursed the Tirana over the dirt roads, but then we were able to go through the Woomera Rocket Range.
But it is amazing when a big disaster happens, how people come together.
Yeah.
So it does prove people can be nice to each other when push comes to shove.
Exactly right. And so we've got strong ties to Darwin. And your earlier story about not wanting to come back, we had no hesitation in coming back to Darwin and lived a very fruitful life. We've now got 3 kids and 9 grandchildren up here. We all live within close proximity to one another. And storms and winds do not worry me. A lot of people are still freaked out about it, but my wife's the same. We embrace it. I love the storms as a weather nut, a bit like yourself.
Yeah.
I do love the wet season. Once the wet breaks, I think it's fantastic.
It is.
The build-up's always a bit hard.
The dry season drives me insane with nothing.
Along with a few other of our mates.
Chris
Garth we can mention.
I think he's in a corner somewhere crying at the moment.
He's in the fetal position, hibernating, waiting for the wets or the build-up in the first rains. No, so look, it was certainly a major experience of our life as newlyweds from Adelaide. We got married on Australia Day in '74. Came up in September, and
that was your welcome to Darwin.
That was our welcome to Darwin. But
so yeah, I was going to ask if whenever you see a cyclone warning, it doesn't worry you anymore? But no,
it does not worry me at all.
Because I know some people do get a bit worried, but we're all different.
We're all different. Well, it's a bit like your little sort of exchange with someone the other day when you said you were excited about the weather down in Tasmania.
Yep.
People that follow it, they've got to understand that's why you follow it.
Yeah.
That gives us excitement, even though it can cause massive destruction and damage.
Which we're, of course, sympathetic over.
And Chris Nitsopoulos, who I consider the guru around the traps with Weather IQ, he's the same. He's had to defend himself at times because he gets excited when cyclones are going to hit, because his business is to
Yeah.
follow and learn about cyclones. So it's not an excitement because of the damage and destruction.
Of course not, no.
It's exciting from a weather system point of view.
Yeah.
So I have not got the knowledge of yourself or Nitso, but I do love watching that sort of stuff and just following it all and following all the good pages like yours and Pilco's and Weather IQ and learning more and just studying them up in my own world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I embrace them.
Best way to do it. So, well, thank you, Daryl. That was great to hear, because you read about it, but I've never myself sat down and spoke with someone who's actually gone through it. So you can read, you can read all the statistics about it and everything, but it's definitely different to get a unique perspective from someone who actually lived it.
Yes,
because it was I wasn't even born then.
No.
It was still 9 years until I was born. So yeah, it was long before my time. So, well, thank you again, and
Pleasure.
yeah, it's been great. Thank you very much.
Okay.